Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Today we're going to be talking about Tinto Talks number 24, so we're going to be talking about talking, which is going to be discussing the Navy for the upcoming game Project Teaser, or as some people like to call it, Project Caesar, and even fewer people like to call it Europa Universalis 5. Without further ado, let's get in. Welcome to another Tinto Talks, the Happy Wednesday. That is, in fact, the most important and critical feature of the Tinto Talks, is that it is Happy Wednesday, and I think this is the 6th or 7th Happy Wednesday in a row. Johan's going for a record. I think this is the current world record for Happy Wednesdays in regards to Tinto Talks, but we'll see. Where we spill the secrets of our entirely super secret, big top, nobody will ever guess the name game, which we refer to as Project Teaser. Jokes on them. We know the game is called Project Teaser. Okay. Today we will delve into a lot of the I remember reading some sort of article that said delve is a word that's more commonly used in, I'm implying that it's potentially possible, but apparently generative AI uses the word delve a lot more than humans do. But we will be delving into a lot of, I very much doubt that this was written by AI, but just every time I see the word now, it just triggers me to be like, is this AI written? Into a lot of naval related concepts where we will talk about everything from maritime presence to naval combat. So this is super cool. I really like the maritime presence kind of mechanic and idea. I really wish that something like this was implemented in Victoria 3, but it's maybe just doesn't fit entirely. I mean, Navy should feel more dynamic, because it was very, very important during that time period, and you could leverage it into a lot of economic naval supremacy was leveraged into a lot of economic supremacy in a way that doesn't translate into the game. But let's continue. First of all, we need to go back to the importance of maritime presence and naval capacity in Project Teaser. Before you can get advanced road networks throughout your country, your proximity propagation is much faster through places where you have maritime presence, and you get maritime presence through sea zones and also rivers and maps. Any sea zone where you have no maritime presence or location without a road network costs about 40 proximity to travel through, which basically means you cannot propagate any control, remembering that control gives you access to more of the economic value of a region that you own, because you are able to, preside over it, rather than it just kind of being in the middle of nowhere in regards to your empire. I really think that control is going to prevent blobbing, and it does seem like a really, really nice mechanic. Also encourage playing tall. More than 3 locations away. Of course, there are things that impact your proximity costs per location, like topography, vegetation development, and societal values as well. We do see topography and vegetation in particular. I'm guessing that this will be one of the advantages of farmlands, is it propagates a lot easier, and by doing so is going to allow you to have better bases of control around where you have farmlands. The heartland has some access, but the coasts are most important to us, and you notice here there's a ton of control along the coasts, and this control can only be kept if you have maritime presence, which can be destroyed militarily by enemies, and so there will be a very significant detriment to blockade and military kind of aggression against you in regards to your ability to control an empire that is separated by the sea, which of course makes sense. For coastal sea zone, if you have 100% maritime presence, the base cost is 5 per location. That's a whole lot less than 40 to traverse through if you don't have a road network. Now, to be fair, you can make a road network to make that decreased, but just, you don't have to make a naval road network, you just have to create presence. If you have less than 100% maritime presence, it will scale the price accordingly. So at 33% maritime presence, if you have no other modifiers, it will cost around 0.33 plus 0.67 times 40, or about 28, 45, which, okay. Makes sense. This is the math where this is the full maritime presence access proportionate to the amount that you have, and then this is the full 40 full cost of proximity proportionate to the amount you have. So lakes and major rivers are always considered to be 100% maritime presence. Sea zones for proximity calculations and market access calculations, which is of course going to make these very, very critical. We will see a map of this kind of down below, just something we wanted to talk about. If you've ever read The Wealth of Nations, which if you haven't, would not recommend recommend it, probably don't do it. But one of the reasons that the industrial or specialization started happening in the Netherlands, this was a little bit before industrialization, was that their access to having a lot of navigable, type of territory, in having tons of riverways and this sort of thing, allowed for specialization, because one guy could make nails and make only nails as a blacksmith. This is discussed extensively in the Wealth of Nations. The making of nails, way too much making of nails, which is why I don't recommend reading it. It really nails down the concept of making nails, but the idea is a blacksmith who only makes nails can make them way better and way faster. The problem is if you don't have a large enough market to buy all those nails, what's the point? But if you have a lot of riverways and can cheaply and easily transport goods, then you can send the nails out, and so you could get the advantages of specialization, which this is kind of just a huge tangent, but the point is that the Netherlands has a lot of navigable riverways, which means that it'll be easy to establish a lot of control here. So this will probably be a pretty good region for building tall, kind of centralized around here, because you are going to have, bonuses for the stuff, because you have 100% maritime presence when you are going inland along the river. Okay. Here we see a proximity to capital for Kalmar in a calculation where it's giving us various provinces that have to be tracked through, and a lot of these look like they're going through sea zones, and then one looks like it's either no maritime presence or not going through a sea zone or road zone or whatever. Why is the sea zone outside Stockholm called Tralhavet? I have no idea, and I probably mispronounced it. As you can see here, tracing proximity out Kalmar to the sea zone of Kalmarsund is a bit costly, as going through land to sea through a port has a higher base cost. Okay, so this is the initial going out to sea costs a bit. This is severely reduced by the infrastructure development as you've built up in that locations, as well as the natural harbor attributes that the location has. Now, coming back here, we do have natural harbors. So this was not a map for naval access. What was the... It wasn't one for the specific of navigable riverways, but I do think it is also has a bunch of natural harbors in here. I think is significant. We do see London is not as green as some of the other ones, but that might just have to do with the amount of infrastructure that's been built. But we see a lot of natural harbors here. Constantinople, of course, looking Constantinople-y. I do think it's not cut off by our camera. There's something new for this game, which we have not done before, with so many locations and such granularity mechanics that emphasize a deeper simulation. We have decided to start treating places differently. Why certain locations grew to be important in history over others. The brighter the green, the better the harbor. We also notice Venetia is also going to have a good one, and as of right now, not an island, but okay. Of course, you can improve the harbor suitability of a location by building up certain infrastructure so that the location that you want to build up lacks the natural benefits. You could still be built up even if it will be more costly to do so. And so this is also pretty nice here, because how else would we rebuild Carthage, which is not looking as green as it ought to be, even though it's a spectacular natural harbor, just saying. The harbor suitability of a location has a significant impact on the trade and proximity calculations, and also impacts how quickly armies can be loaded or unloaded from a location. And so here we do see a nice kind of graphic showing what exactly we're getting harbor suitability. At least in Bristol, it's 35%. Currently, it's 25% from the natural harbor and an additional 10% from the wharf, and it's all the impacts it's going to give us. The distance cost to capital through port is going to be decreased. Disembark modifiers are going to be changed. Trade embark disembark cost is changed as well. And so having at least one place that is really, really built up is probably going to be pretty useful for the purpose of trade, because if we are getting a larger and larger kind of bonus from buildings like the wharf, then it seems to be the case that you would be able to trade better from there than you could a province that is maybe closer. And if you are, and I hope that this allows you to really build singular places incredibly tall to try and get higher and higher harbor suitability. I don't know if Wharf is like kind of a starting game building, and this can be built up way higher, but it also means if it can be built up way higher, the natural harbor suitability is going to be incredibly useful in the early game, and then in the late game it's going to be less important, and you can kind of force ports wherever you want to, which kind of makes some sense, where the natural harbors, it's because there's a giant bay where you can put ships without them getting wrecked, but as you gain the ability and engineering to just like create bays, it's not as important. Okay. Bristol has its uses. Oh man, angering the Brits already. The main question though, rovers or city? Okay. Shipbuilding. One of the disadvantages of playing a naval nation in other games we've made was the simple fact that unless you had a large coastline, you could not compete no matter how good the coastal locations you had were. During my Great Britain run in Victoria 3, I was tearing my hair out because of convoy reasons. Couldn't build many convoys as I wanted to. I wanted to just build more and more convoys, and also there was a separate issue where after a certain point, the shipping costs across land costing 0 convoys felt a little bit unfair because Great Britain was stuck on an island, and Great Britain had, well, this is kind of a Victoria 3 tangent, but the point is that the fact that you were gated by some considerations as provinces rather than economic activity when it came to things like shipbuilding, or your ability to access a certain amount of convoys felt a little bit strange, because in theory, if you had at least one place that was on the coast, you could build that up huge, and it does seem like EU5 is going to allow that. One of the reasons was the simple fact that you could only build one ship at a time, and if you wanted to recruit a regiment, you couldn't. Talk about EU4 here, where if you want to build a ship, you can't build a boat simultaneously, and if you want to build 5 boats, you better have 5 coastal provinces, and if you don't, you're going to be in for a bad time. In Project Teaser, this has changed. First of all, there are 3 different construction queues in a location. First, there's a civil one for buildings, RGOs and all other non-military oriented things you can do in a location. Secondly, you have an army-based queue, and finally there's the naval-based queue, so you can recruit regiments at the same time as you build ships, which of course makes sense. We have also, meant to also make sense, we have also added the concept of parallel shipbuilding in a location where buildings can unlock additional shipbuilding slots in a location, so we can build multiple ships out of one location, where at the end of the game you can have close to 20 ships at the same time in the same shipyard with all the related advances and other stuff unlocked. We do see the unique building, the Venetian Arsenal here, which is going to give us shipbuilding capacity +4. Also, if you couldn't build ships before, now you can. We also do get to see a little bit of the production requirements here, where we're going to need naval supplies, metalworks, lumber, and tar. I don't think tar is something we've seen in terms of natural resources, so it must be produced from one of the resources, the natural resources that we've seen, but we, of course, these is going to limit who can build ships to some degree if you can't get access to these resources. But the very important thing here is Venice can build more ships at one time, which makes sense, and the ability to build multiple ships at a single location means that you can build tall better, or you can at least support the construction of a bigger navy while building tall, which is going to be quite nice. Okay, one of the most powerful abilities you can do during war is blockading another nation's coast. Really like this. Really wish we could do that better in Victoria 3 rather than raiding convoys, but it is what it is. The immediate impact is a reduction of food production and maximum control, and making trades more costly and likely to reroute. That seems all very significant. Reduction of foods is going to make people upset. Control decreasing is going to decrease the proportion of money that is going to the coffers, rather it's going to go to local stuff as a result of the buildings, and you just have less control, which obviously it's well named, and making trades even more costly and likely to reroute also seems very significant, especially if you are reliant on trade for certain resources in order to conduct said war. The ability to just blockade someone, starve them out, and then land them, or then engage in land military action, does seem a little bit better with this than it has in previous games. There's also the fact that development growth is severely slowed, the decline of prosperity, and a dramatic reduction to your maritime presence. And here we see maritime presence, remember, at 100 gives a ton of control. At 0, you would have to spend 40 to travel through sea provinces. And so this is basically just going to, I mean, it seems like it'll wreck your country if you just get full blockaded. As some say, an image is more than tells you more than 1,000 words. So we'll use a few screenshots of tooltips related to blockades to make it a little bit more clear. We see blockaded by enemies. We see monthly prosperity -2%, max control -10%, and this control is not including the maritime presence, right? Maritime presence -2, which is going to decay it down. So that's -2%, which is going to be overcome by whatever modifiers, or it's going to be mitigated by whatever positive modifiers you have for establishing maritime presence. But this is going to be something that has a significant lagging effect too. So if you get blockaded for an extended period of time, recovering will take an extended period of time. We see total food multiplier -50%. That's a lot of percents. That's like more than 40. But that seems like a pretty good way to start starving out your pops. In addition to the minus prosperity, all of these are like similarly, like they're similar, but they're overlapped. These penalties seem huge. Monthly development growth -20%, trade embark / disembark cost +200%, which is likely going to make it not so profitable to send you goods. So this is going to, rightly so, be really significant. And so I think that the Navy is going to be way more important, or way more of a tool in Tinto. No, wait. Europa Universalis 5, I mean Project Teaser, than it has in previous games. Even with a single port fully blockaded, the maritime presence in the sea zone is severely impacted, so you don't have to blockade all the locations in the sea zone, just one, and will take many months to recover unless you got coastal forts or navies patrolling it for a long time after the war. And you see here the change in maritime presence is -0.3. There's 0.43 from here, which I'm assuming is the place that's blockaded. That blockade is not even anywhere near this level of blockade here, but it is it is still just dragging down the control for all of these locations as well, because you would have to travel through that sea zone, and so really going to negatively impact your nation. I do love the adjective for Holland. What is the adjective for Holland? Hollandish? Outlandish, Hollandish. Okay, true. Not all ships are great at blockading. You will likely want to have heavy ships and or light ships to do the blockading. The two other types of ships are transports and galleys, which we'll talk about in a second. Here we see traditional galleys and one hulk, and this is the blockade capacity here, and they are blockading the following. Okay, this type of hulk doesn't smash. That's true. Or do they not typically smash? I think we could go ramming speed, but that's discussion for another time. Not all locations are equal, that's true, and different populations, infrastructure, and development increase how much ships are required to blockade a location. And so you see here, there is going to be, let's see, blockade capacity is a 1.02, and it is due to the population, the port, and the development. So there's about 32,000 people living there, and okay, so you can't blockade the Constantinople very easily. Ships repairing. Every month that a fleet is in a sea zone that's not adjacent to a friendly port, they will start taking attrition. Fantastic. This attrition is increased dramatically if the fleet is outside the naval range, so we have the new concept of naval range. This attrition creates a chance for ships to be damaged. While usually you can only repair a ship, a ship in a port, there are some advances that allow you to repair your ships in coastal sea zones, where the Age of Revolutions allows you to repair a ship up to 50% efficiency without going back to a port. So you just, cruise on up to a beach somewhere, and you just start building back. Naval range is calculated from every core province that you own, or is owned by one of your subjects, or is owned by someone you have negotiated fleet basing rights with. And here we see a map that was very disorienting at first, but this green, this is the Mediterranean. I believe this is Venice, the country we are playing as here, and you can see the access that they have, or can we control the entire Mediterranean Sea as Venice? That is in fact true, and this is our naval range here, which I believe they have a couple of outposts over here, which is why their naval range extends down a little bit further here, but this is going to be where they can kind of operate in without starting to lose ships to attrition. So if they wanted to invade Georgia, they would need a little bit of attrition. Aragon, some attrition. Castile would be basically impossible, or at least impossible. You wouldn't be able to blockade. Even though it's coastal, you wouldn't be able to blockade anything in Castile as Venice, even though you have a massive fleet, right? Because the attrition, I'm assuming, would be prohibitive. Transporting troops, ships in Project Teaser will have the capacity to transport regiments. The transport capacity of the ship is not measured in regiments, but in the amount of men it can carry, knowing that regiments can vary in size. Usually the transports are better at carrying regiments. That, of course, makes sense, but other ships can carry some as well. It'll be interesting to see what people end up building out. Yeah. We also have automated transportation, similar to EU4, to make moving armies around the world less painful. Fantastic. Combat. In naval battle, there's no separate bombardment phase. Makes sense, as most ships have guns, and they tend to want to use them constantly. Yeah. Otherwise, it works very similar to land combat in that you have different sections, but the individual ships you have fire upon each other. But while it comes to the actual combat algorithm, ships will work a bit differently, as there is no combat power or amount of soldiers fighting to consider. Instead, ships have an amount of cannons and hull size. Cannons are the offensive value and hulls are the defensive. It, of course, wouldn't make sense to do it based on soldiers, because you have some ships like transports which aren't going to have a lot of cannons, and it may have a decent amount of hull size, and so it'll be interesting to see how those fight out. Maybe you can use them as meat shields in terms of the game mechanics, but it makes more sense to have cannons and hull size, of course, be the consideration rather than people. Types of ships. There are 4 different categories of ships, as we mentioned earlier: heavy ships, light ships, galleys, and transports. In each category, there is at least 1 ship in each age that can be researched, which doesn't sound, I think there were 5 ages, so this doesn't sound like a lot of ships, but there are also many unique ships that can be built, assuming you get the technology that it's associated with them, which is going to give, I think, pretty significant advantages to different countries at different phases of the game. There's no real restriction on what roles different ships can perform, but transports are not very good at blockading, and light ship may not be ideal for transporting a lot of soldiers. Of course, this makes sense. Each type of ship differs on how many trained soldiers they require for their crew and how many cannons they can have, and more. Which I assume was also going to affect various other things. We do see, I think this is the amount of people. Is this the movement speed? We'd see cannons as one of the things, or is it the hull? You can raise ships as levies from your population. Very interested to read this, but those are usually best suited to transport armies shorter distances and should not be relied on as sea battle. But they didn't say cannot be relied on in sea battle, so we're going to be relying on the peasants. We're probably not. Work in progress UI, but there's a unique galley for Aragon. 2 more guns, 1 more hull, but need 30 more soldiers. So, Catalan galley. So here we see 2 more guns. These are hull size then, and this is the traditional galley. And there's also an early Iberian caravel with all the Iberian countries may build. Stay tuned, as next week we'll talk about how colonization works. Colonization, my favorite. Really just like colonization minigame for EU4. That's how I like to play in the past. But here we can kind of see, it depends how much you have to pay on these wages, right? Or how significant the plus 30 is going to be. You can see the differential here, but if the cost, it looks like the cost for us to construct is just an additional 20%. It'll be interesting what the additional upkeep is, but maybe I feel that they probably make the uniques worth building, so we're going to assume that the amount of people working in the galley is not that significant, but maybe it is, or maybe it's just very cost effective once you've already recruited up all the way, but recruitment is going to be a little bit slow, and so this gives advantages to people who are kind of really adding a lot of buildings that give sailor recruitment, something like this maybe. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I hope you guys enjoyed. We did talk about Navy today for the very big top secret game of Project Teaser. If you liked, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing. And other than that, have a happy Wednesday.